A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Let's turn our attention to how we better understand the Bible, breaking down the fact that there are some particular genres we can talk about. When you hear that the Bible has history or poetry or wisdom literature, there of course are books of the law and there are gospels and epistles. You might be wondering what all that means. Well, our next guest says if you can work out what genre you are reading, you'll better understand the scriptures. Andy Judd is a lecturer in Old Testament at Ridley College in Melbourne. He's the author of a new book called Modern Genre Theory. And it's another one of those books that's been shortlisted for the Australian Christian Book of the Year Awards, being announced just not too far away, 21st of August. Andy, a special welcome along to 2020.
Thank you so much, Neil. Thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here.
Hey, Andy, it's more than likely with a title like yours, Modern Genre Theory, that you're aiming probably at those who want to take their Bible study to a new level. Is that the people you're writing for?
Yes, it's not the Christian Book Awards for the most catching title, is it? No, what we're trying to do in modern genre theory is help people see how having a better understanding of genre helps us better understand the Bible. And I really wrote it originally for my students at Ridley College, who are people who are coming from all sorts of different walks of life. Not everyone's training to be a minister or pastor, though some are, but they're coming in with a desire to read the Bible better and more seriously. And so they're the sort of the first audience, if you like, I wrote this book for.
And you know what? They're Bible students. For ordinary people who might be sitting at home and having a daily Bible reading and thinking, how can I take my daily Bible reading to a new level? As an introductory book to the sorts of things you write about, is this appropriate for people who could just be reading this at home?
Yes, I try to write for real human consumption. That's always the test, isn't it, for us academics? Can we put our big ideas into language that non-specialists can understand? Because that's the real test. We're not just meant to be, well, at least I believe, the job of a Bible college lecturer is not just to talk to other Bible college lecturers or even Bible college students, but to actually help regular, real-life, normal Christians who want to read the Bible to get the most out of it. So that's the test for me. I'll let your readers decide whether I've made it kind of fit for human consumption. But that's certainly the goal, because I'm always inspired by writers who can put very complex ideas from their field in ways that lay people can understand, and that's in any field. I appreciate good communicators. So look, I aspire to that. I'll let others decide whether that's achievable. But really, we all have an idea about genre. We might not know that we do, but whenever we pick up a book, we have to answer that question: what's this thing that I'm reading? What's it for? What are the rules? What's the game I'm playing? And so the more we can reflect on that and be conscious of those decisions, I think the better readers will be.
Hey, I mentioned a few genres just a few moments ago, but what are the ones that come to mind for you that are typical when we pick up the Bible to read?
The Bible is a feast of genres. The Bible is more like a library than a book. I think that's the first thing that people realize. I spoke to a guy last night at a church event I was at who's just become a Christian and just started reading the Old Testament, and he thought, well, this is a strange country, isn't it? This is we're into new territory here. Now he was loving it, but he was just aware that we're reading lots of different things. What's the Book of Numbers? What's that for? What's the Book of Genesis? What's that for? We have lots of different genres, and I think that's what makes the Bible beautiful, but also what makes it sometimes challenging. And some of the main genres you'll come across instantly are from the first book, Genesis. It's full of genealogies. So what's Ancestry.com doing in the Bible? What's that there for? Or what's a poetic account? What's a family story? Some of the stories there really go into the kind of the dark closets of this family's history. It's like what you get out of grandma after a couple of sherries at Christmas. All the family secrets start sort of spilling out. So what's that there for? Then you have poetry. You've got whole books of poetry. You've got the book of Psalms, which is sort of religious poetry or kind of lots of hymns of praise and lament. But then you've got the Song of Songs, which is sort of love poetry and seems, a little bit too saucy and steamy to be in the Bible. And then you have apocalyptic literature. You get to Daniel and suddenly there's multiple-headed, multiple-horned beasts flying around. Look, it's an exciting place to visit. For those who can't afford overseas travel in these these times, pick up the Bible. You'll travel to a strange land for free.
Wow. And are some of these genres, Andy, a little bit unique to the Bible, or are they unique to a first century when these biblical books and letters were written? What's unique about some of these genres in the Bible?
I think, Neil, it's a good question. I think the main thing is that the people at the time would have known what to do with some of these genres in a way that we don't, because they're just not part of our culture. And that's one of the things we need to know about genres. They sort of change. They're part of a culture. Horror films are a thing that you and I are familiar with, but probably our great-great-great-grandparents wouldn't have known quite what to do with them. And it works in reverse too. So I mentioned the Book of Daniel. The Book of Daniel is an apocalypse, which is a genre which is not actually common today. It was common for a couple of hundred years around the turn of the BC AD period, around when Jesus was around. But it's not something that we pick up every day when we're having our morning coffee. And so when we start reading it, we're traveling to a foreign country and we're reading literature from another culture. Now, with a bit of effort and a bit of open-mindedness, any traveller to another country can learn the culture, at least learn the culture better. But it takes a bit of curiosity. It takes a little bit of you want to be a good traveller, Neil. You don't want to be sort of jumping off the plane and sort of assuming that everything works the way you're used to. So apocalypse would be one that really is not unique to the Bible, but is unique to that time period. And so we need to understand the rules of the game.
Are there special rules around things like that we read about Jesus in the Gospels? Sort of a specialised form of biography, isn't it? Is that something a little bit unique too in biblical time?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example, Neil. The Gospels are not something that is, I should say that they are reasonably unique to Christianity. So you mentioned biographies, but they're not written the way that we would write a biography. For instance, they don't tell us, where Jesus went to school and sort of, the details about his birth that we might want to know, like, the date, for instance. They give much more general information. The other thing that we take for granted is that a biography should focus on sort of, telling us the events of his life in a chronological order. Well, the gospel writers aren't always interested in doing that. Sometimes they're interested in pulling out the significance of what happened in his life, showing us comparisons between stories so we know how to respond. So they're trying to do something different. So they're both similar to biographies in the ancient world, but also slightly different because of Jesus is an unusual figure, to say the least. So the way that they've preserved the teaching about him, they had to invent these new ways of telling the story. So yeah, it's same and different, and it's same enough that we sort of learn to work with the literature, but there's enough differences that we just need to pay attention and not let our assumptions about how a ancient genre should work dictate how we read it.
So for some people who say, the Bible is just a history book, that's actually too much of a generalisation, isn't it? Because in order to understand the library of genres that you have in the Bible, you have to be able to understand something about each one.
Absolutely. So one of the confusions we have is, what do you mean by history book? Do you mean that it's true? Because I believe it's true. Absolutely it's true. But there's more than one way to tell the truth about the past. So I'll give one example. I was at a barbecue and a dear friend of mine who's not a believer, he was talking about this very question. He says, look, is the Bible history or is it made up? Is it history or is it kind of made up nonsense? And he had a very low view of poetry. I said, well, some of it's poetry. He's like, well, then it's made up. And I asked him this question, Neil. And it's a question that I think was helpful for him. I said, look, Wilfred Owen wrote a bunch of poems after World War I. Famous English poet. He wrote poems about his experience as a soldier on the front lines, suffering under the mustard gas. It's very poignant stuff. Really influenced how people saw the war. Now, that's not history in the sense that he's not writing history. He's writing poems. But he's capturing something true about World War I, which is in some ways more true than just reading through Wikipedia about the dates of the battles. He's telling us what it was like to be on the front lines watching your best mate suffocate under mustard gas. So is he still telling the truth? Are there more? Can you tell the truth in a poem? And I think obviously the answer is yes. So the Bible writers tell the truth, but they tell the truth in a way that's appropriate to their content. And they tell the truth often in a way that's meant to move us to action, not just inform us about our curiosity about the past. So I'd say the Bible's absolutely true, but it's not all written as history. Some of it's songs, some of it's poetry, some of it's other things. There's cooking recipes in there now. I mean, there's everything. And you got to pay attention.
There'll be some who would say the only book I need is the Bible, and God will speak to me through that. And you might have your own thoughts as to whether that's really relevant or possible, because I guess ultimately you're going to say, yes, God can speak in any way that he wants to. But if you're going to be a student of the Bible, you really do have to find some tools that will help you understand some of these genres so you can make sense of the context of the scriptures. Is that what you've tried to do?
Absolutely. I mean, Christianity is meant to be a team sport, so we rely on our team. We rely on other believers to help us. I mean, God doesn't want us just sitting on our own in our closet reading our Bible on our own. We should do that, but we shouldn't only do that. I mean, people reading without any regard to what other people think. I mean, that's a surefire way of starting a cult, Neil. If you just kind of go off on your own and don't listen to anyone else. I learn from people from different cultures. I learn from people from different time periods. I learn from dead people. I mean, God has given us a cloud of witnesses of people who read the Bible in different times and different places. And it's not about just listening to ivory tower academics like me. And we should listen, and I do, you should listen to people who've lived a bit of life and who can help you to kind of process what it means. Because at the end of the day, we want to hear God's voice and we want to do what it says. And I think learning from other people is a great way of doing that. Not that we're putting, the commentaries and the professors above the Bible's authority, but that we're humbly reading together with other believers across time and space. And I think that's actually very Christian to do that.
It might even be amusing to think that, as you say, if you don't use any of those tools at your disposal, it might be a surefire way to start a cult. But this is something for you, wasn't it? Coming to the realization that a lot of the controversies that people argue about the Bible come down to the genre. Come down to the text and how you understand it. So if you're going to get on the same page as others, you've got to understand something about genre.
Well, we all have a preconception about genre. That's the thing. So even if you say, well, I'm just reading the Bible on its own, we all have, we've all been influenced by our culture. And sometimes we're not even aware of that influence. So there was a chap in 1844 who was pretty sure he worked out when Jesus was returning. So he started a kind of a movement. He pinpointed the date. I think it was in October 1844, and he did it by counting up all the numbers in chapter 8 of Daniel. And so he worked backwards and kind of added them together, and decided that Jesus is definitely returning, if you add up the numbers, in 1844. Now, spoiler alert, Neil, Jesus, as far as I'm aware, did not return in 1844. If he did, we're in trouble. All right? That's right. So where did he go wrong? Well, he would say, well, I'm just reading it as straight ahead, what it says, I'm reading it literally. But what he didn't realize is he was making assumptions about how the writer of Daniel should be using numbers. He assumed that he knew what was going on, and read it his way, rather than sort of listening to other people who would say, well, maybe those numbers are not meant to be tallied up in order to predict the return of Christ. In fact, he didn't even listen to Jesus, who said no one knows the hour or the day, but that's another story. So, we get into trouble, I think, when we forge ahead and make assumptions about how these books work without listening carefully and without paying attention to genre. So I'm all for reading the Bible. I'm all for reading the Bible on your own even, but we also should listen to others and listen to people and mind the gap. That's one of my friend Brian Rosner always says, you've got to mind the gap when you're reading the Bible. You've got to realize that there's a little bit of a gap historically between you and Daniel, and it's not an insurmountable gap. You just got to be careful that you sort of be aware that they're in a different culture and a different time period. So that's my encouragement. I think a lot of our disagreements come down to assumptions about genre, which turn out to be incorrect. I mean, I had my aunt came to church and was absolutely outraged about all the nasty things that were happening in the Bible that were being described in this book. That people were cutting off each other's thumbs and big toes and all this kind of stuff. And she said, I can't believe in a God who endorses that. Now, she was assuming that the Bible's a fairy tale, and in a fairy tale, you're meant to copy what the characters do, right? Like, go do likewise. The Bible's not a fairy tale. It's telling you what happened. It's not recommending it all the time. Often the narrative just describes awful events which you're meant to reflect on. You're not meant to emulate. You're not meant to go around cutting off people's thumbs and big toes, for instance. But she was assuming that that's how the Bible works. It's moral examples. Well, that might not be a good assumption. I think paying attention to genre always pays dividends, and it makes it a lot of our confusions, a lot of our issues, a lot of our cults, to be honest, start off as misunderstandings about genre.
Andy, you've whet our appetites, and I'll love to have you back on another day and explore some of the issues that you just raised just beautifully. Andy Judd, he's a lecturer in Old Testament at Ridley College in Melbourne. He's the author of the book Modern Genre Theory. And it sounds very academic, but as you can hear, it really is very meaningful if you're looking to try and interpret and understand the scriptures. You can connect with Andy at andyjudd.com. That's Andy Judd with JUDD.com. You can also follow him on social media. He's on Blue Sky, on X, and on Instagram. His book is called Modern Genre Theory, an Introduction for Biblical Studies. Andy, we'll do this again another day, but thanks so much for being with us today on 2020.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Neil.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.